Hi there. In the Hindu epic poem, the Mahabharata, there is a book within the book called the Bhagavad Gita, and there is an image that crops up during the whole, well, during the story of the Mahabharata, particularly the Arjuna's chariot, pulled by the charioteer, who's Lord Krishna, and it suddenly struck me the other day about the symbolism attached to this chariot, to Arjuna's chariot, and how basically these are symbols for life and our relationship to this world and to the transcendental, and how we could possibly reconcile the transcendental with this world as soul. Um, and so basically, we have the kind of like I've taken the whole thing apart, the chariot apart. So the road upon which the chariot travels is the marga, the path, uh, which is um, which is this world or these worlds of the demiurge, basically. So I'm interpreting Hinduism in a more Gnostic way, I suppose, really. But I'm also influenced by Plato's Phaedrus discourse as well. Um, where he talks about the chariot being driven by the two horses, good and evil, and one must balance between the two forces in this world. So the idea of balance comes in here, and the idea of one being sort of yoked to moral principle on one hand, and pragmatism on the other, which is the law of necessity and the law of talent even as well. The eye for the eye and the tooth for a tooth kind of thing. So basically, we have here the road, the path of these worlds. And then we have the chariot itself, which is made up with the chariot box itself is soul. And in Hinduism, the soul is divided into two parts. The Atman, which is the sort of higher soul or the consciousness soul, as projected. And then there's the Jiva, which is basically the life force of the individual, Jiva Atman. And so I've represented the Jiva by the chariot wheels. But there are wheels as well. So we have the idea of the three doshas, the three faults of reality of the individual, being a sort of interacting with each other as the wheel spins round. So there's a dynamic balance between the three forces: destruction, creation, and preservation, basically. Although that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. And the other wheel, of course, is the wheel of the three gunas, the three qualities of existence, which are, as I've interpreted, destruction, creation, and preservation. And these spin round as a wheel of fortune kind of way. This is karma, um, which is, which karma is the sort of impetus force that drives us forward, that keeps us locked into samsara, which is the wheel of dukkha and sukha, of suffering and joy. They're all temporary qualities, of course. They keep changing. It's a dance, and the images keep changing, but the energy keeps on. The three qualities keep on spinning round with the wheel. I mean, that's a sort of a video in itself, really, or a series of videos in itself. And then we have the charioteer, which is God or Krishna. And Arjuna is the person, the king, the future king, who's being driven by the charioteer on the chariot, which is soul. And soul is linked to these two horses. The black horse on the left is pragmatism, and that's reigned by bioeconomic necessity or imperative. So, a matter of survival, we have to survive. And in order to do that, we need to be pragmatic. Have to compromise our moral principles. So the idea of dilemma comes in, and so pragmatism is linked to moral principle, and this is reigned by sensitivity to morality and dilemma and crisis. So we have these two horses pulling this chariot. Um, and it's very, very difficult to get the balance right. So the idea is that you put these reins in the hands of the transcendental God, who is Krishna, uh, the charioteer. And if you put your hands, you put the reins in the hands of God, transcendental God, and perhaps the angels of A, which I covered in another video, you will be able to successfully um, ride in the chariot, the Jiva Atman, through karma, through the laws of cause and effect, through the worlds of cause and effect, as it were. And that's basically the biggest conclusion to take from all this. Um, and because you yourself will get it wrong. I mean, you'll either give too much rein to pragmatism, or to the bioeconomic imperative, your biological urges, or you'll give too much rein to moral sensitivity, and you won't be able to do anything. You'll be sort of unable to get up in the morning because you'll be frightened of doing something wrong. You become completely obsessed, go into obsessive compulsive disorder even, as a result of being so sensitive, that you might tread on an insect or something like that. And yet you might have to in order to get across the room in order to eat. And so in a way, how can you sort of reconcile these two horses which are yoked together? You give the reins to God, and it's either the angels of A or God, the transcendental God, through the Holy Spirit, through the ministry of Christ, that will keep you on the straight and narrow, that will keep these two horses reined tightly in, so that the chariot doesn't overturn through balance, because in the end, in these worlds, it's a matter of balance between the two horses that are pulling us along, and the two horses are pulling us along, and we're being driven along by the wheels, and we're in this chariot as soul, we're chained basically to cause and effect. We're chained at the moment anyway to having to compromise and having moral dilemma. So and sometimes we have to do the thing that doesn't seem very ethical. The end justifies the means, sort of thing. But then we have to go back to the means, because the means are very important. They have to be moral. They have to be within an ethical framework. So who is to decide? Well, the transcendental God, through the operation of the Holy Spirit, decides, in fact, more or less. But God, this God, transcendental God, is not omniscient, and also in this world is not entirely present in this world, and isn't entirely know himself or herself what to do for the best. And the chariot is going to overturn. But because soul is being operated by the transcendental God, the chariot will probably, in most cases, remain upright and remain steady in its course, provided you give your life over to this higher power, basically, that is other than you and greater than you. Although in Gnostic terms, not omniscient or omnipotent, limited, in fact, within these worlds of the demiurge, and help can come from time to time. It comes and it goes, and that's the reality of our prison, of the material worlds, of the psychic worlds, the worlds right up, in fact, to the spiritual world. They are all caste and duality. They all have a price to pay. Within each sphere, there's always a sort of price. There's always a Frankenstein monster that has been created by our actions, by our lust for power, by our pride, and by our desire for profit. Um, and I've been listening to Alien on Audible books. There's two dramatized Audible dramatizations, originals by Audible, and then there's the actual book itself, which is narrated, and it's very interesting because when you consider who is the worst. I mean, is it the alien, who basically is just an animal, a hive animal that wishes to procreate its species at any cost, and is just obeying the instincts of primal instincts of a biological imperative, or is it the Wayland Yutani Corporation that wishes to take this dangerous creature and weaponize it and study it and dissect it and vivisect it, and train it to do its will. And they are behind the alien movies as well. They are behind their irresponsibility, their selfishness, their desire for power, their pridefulness, and their desire for profit, beyond above people, makes everybody expendable to these ravaging creatures. And you think to yourself, which is the worst? And you come to the conclusion that the human that is motivated by profit, power, and is prideful, is actually worse than the most terrible creatures of the universe, which alien is one. I mean, a virus is another, implacable, unstoppable, obviously, without any compassion for you, or for any of the hosts that it must inevitably infect and destroy, in order to propagate its species, which is all it's interested in, which is basically the fundamental raison d'etre of all sentient beings in this world, survival at all costs, basically. And But I suppose, and pride, profit, and power, I suppose, are what make the human species survive, um, and at a great cost to the environment and ultimately to the planet, or Earth. But what does that matter so long as your species is propagated? And in a way, we are more vicious as a species. We are actually more vicious, than the alien creature. But that's not to say that you, watching this video, are more vicious than the alien. You possibly have moral principles and sensitivity, and you don't believe that it's right to exploit, manipulate, predate, and oppress other people. You don't believe that. Or perhaps maybe you accept that must happen, in these worlds. And you can only really counter, the will to survive at any cost, sort of on a very local sort of neighborhood kind of level, or even just within your family or within just yourself. As the song says, let there be peace within me first. Sort of Buddhist idea as well. So anyway, what does this actually mean, though? Giving the reins, giving sensitivity, and on one hand, and the bioeconomic imperative or drive, or the other rein to, on the other hand, to both these reins to God. What does it actually mean? And that, of course, is one of the great occult, one of the great hidden, mysteries, I suppose, of the whole universe. Because what does that mean? How is it done? How can you be sure that the charioteer is Krishna? How can you be sure that the chariot is going where it must? How can you be sure that the chariot won't tip up any moment because of imbalance? And that's one of the great mysteries. It's impossible to describe. It's impossible to say, and it's impossible to say how you might invite Krishna to get on the chariot itself. Of course, there's the great mantra, Hare Krishna, and people will say that is a method. Chanting Krishna's name 108 times a day, will in fact enable Krishna to take the reins and to steer your chariot through the ups and downs and the temptations of this world. Um, and be that as it may, I think even that method can sometimes pale, can sometimes become corrupted because it's a method which has its origin in this world. I mean, you're using your voice or your mind, which is attached to this world. So inevitably, there's going to be a sort of corruption current going in even to the great mantra itself. And you could end up, creating groups around the great mantra, Hare Krishna, that have got very little to do with the spirituality of Krishna. That I could see that sort of happening as well, unfortunately. And for religion to become partisan and cults to grow up and control mechanisms, which is why, as you know, I hate all cults and churches, and I won't, I think I won't go near any of churches and cults and temples and whatever, even though they have a romantic lure. They do have a romantic kind of, they attract me greatly. But then when I get in this temple religion, I wish I wasn't there. I wish I could get out because I can see immediately that every church and every cult and every temple is attached to this world, and this world is corrupting, corruptible, and corrupted. So you need to have that as a mantra in your mind as well. Don't ever forget that. So I suppose even we find ourselves as soul, as the chariot, but our soul is attached to the wheel of fortune, the wheels of fortune, and the wheels as they go round and round, they drag us through this world, and we have to let the reins be guided by God, a transcendental God, and that is a mysterious path. That is a mysterious thing that happens or may not happen, and that you should be ready for anything really. I suppose, and you should be ready for the fact that the person that's driving the chariot may not be Krishna. It may be the demiurge himself, in which case the chariot is going to overturn very quickly, and you are going to be flung out into chaos. So in a way, Gnosticism has a kind of a pessimistic view of Arjuna's chariot, and even a pessimistic view of putting yourself in the hands of God in this world. And yet, of course, too much pessimism, and you won't be able to get up out of bed in the morning. But too much optimism would be the optimism of the fool in the Tower of the Fool, and you'll be turning the Arjuna's chariot into a facsimile of the prison in which we are in now. And so don't be too optimistic, but don't be too pessimistic. So I suppose balance comes into it again. The balance must be struck, a dynamic equilibrium between pessimism and optimism, between pragmatism and moral principle. which is about all that can be said about it, really.